welcome you to this new .tv channel for astrological wisdom being beamed to the world. And in this first episode, we're just going to talk about the cosmic consciousness through celestial radiance aspect of the show. The subtitle, because that's kind of a mouthful. But at this time, the sun is just here rising up the eastern horizon, and the mountains are beautiful. And it's December, and it's warm. I'm outside in the middle of December. There's some global warming going on when that's happening. But first of all, I wanted to talk about astrologers uniting. And this is an opportunity, this channel, for astrologers across the globe to get their work out there, to make things happen. And in Asheville, North Carolina, here we have a group called the AFOA, the Asheville Friends of Astrology, and we invite speakers to come. We're a new group, and so we want to. Our goal is to, disseminate astrological wisdom through our community, but at the same time, why not reach the whole world with the technology that's available? So we're going to invite speakers, and then when you come, and I can video your lecture and then put it on Astrology Illustrated TV. And that's going to be called the Astrology Show segment. So if you're interested in being part of the Astrology Show segment, just come on down to Asheville, North Carolina, and we'll get you a lecture going on, and we'll video the lecture and beam your wisdom to the world, because astrologers have been sort of pushed to the sidelines by the Western mind and the Western world, and now it's our time to come back and show exactly what we really are doing without all the cover up. And we're going to be looking at that. What is astrology? I mean, what is this thing called astrology? It seems so steeped in superstition, and I think it's interesting that when I'm talking about astrology, and someone says to say their friend that knows nothing of astrology, you should have your chart done, and the constant answer is, oh, I wouldn't want to know. I'm afraid to know, as if an astrologer is going to tell them their future, And that's the big misconception about astrology, that astrology is not about predicting exact futures. Saying, oh, at time T of your future, this event X is going to happen. There's nothing you can do about it. See, astrology is not about that. Astrology is, first of all, a little smarter than that. Give us some credit. Astrology is, and also, we don't want to predict exact futures for people. We'd rather say, okay, here's the trend, here's the flow, here's the season of the soul. Remember the Bible in Ecclesiastes where it says there's a time for every season under the sun? A time to grieve, a time to live, a time to love, a time to do it all. Well, astrology is the language of that timing. It'll tune you right in to how exactly things are coming together for you. So astrology is a language of poetic metaphors inspired by the constantly changing sky, and mythological storytelling. The power of myth, as Joseph Campbell would have called it. Many great minds throughout history have partaken of astrology's wisdom, including people like Benjamin Franklin, Copernicus, Galileo. The list goes on. Many of the Catholic popes in the early church had astrologers. Sir Isaac Newton, who most physicists claim is the father of science, at least classical science. Then, of course, you had Johannes Kepler, who was the most powerful example of a mythical and mystical mathematician, astrologer, who both studied the cosmos out here and measured the orbits and figured out the 3 laws of planetary motion, but which laid the foundation for Newton's work in gravitation, discovering gravity. But at the same time, he was all doing it because of his inner exploration of God, of the spirit, of his mystical communion with life, And other people were interested in astrology too. People like Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist who particularly emphasized the theory of synchronicity, that things don't have to be caused by one another, but that there can be an acausal connection. You think of someone, and the phone rings, Was there a force? Maybe not as we traditionally describe forces, but there was definitely a connection at that moment, that things can influence each other just through the synchronicity of the meaning, the similar meanings. People like Winston Churchill, Mark Twain, the list goes on. Shakespeare, many of his plays are full of astrological imagery. So he was definitely inspired by the cosmos. And even recently, world leaders like Nancy and Ronald Reagan. There was a reason Ronald Reagan was sworn in at a certain time. I think he was sworn in like 1 in the morning because the astrologer Joan Quigley out of San Francisco was, being paid to guide the president through astrological timing of events, saying, okay, on this day, it's a great day to give a lecture, because astrology will tell you what kind of possibilities are in the air, If the planet Jupiter is coming to alignment with where Venus was when you were born, it's a great season of love, it's a great season of celebration. And even Queen Elizabeth, one of the greatest monarchs in the world, that brought England from a nation of what do they call it? A nation of plowshares and farmers to one of the greatest naval empires the world had ever seen. Even she used astrology with her court astrologer John Dee. Astrology has been around, and it isn't going away. Yet most scholars of science and religion will be the first to proclaim that astrology has no merit whatsoever, without even investigating its true principles. Imagine that. I wrote an article on my website, divineinspirationastrology.com, called Biblical Insights into Astrology. And in it, I talk about a lot of the biblical insights that are directly related to the sky, and how it is used as a communication vehicle to God. And in Job, when God's breaking it down, saying, can you, Job, bring forth the Mazzaroth in their seasons? Can you loose the bonds of Orion? Can you, understand the sweet influences of the Pleiades? He's talking about these influences, and he says, do you know the principles of the heavens and how I have given them dominion over the earth? It's like God is saying to Job, first of all, do you know that I bring forth the Mazzaroth in their seasons? Now, this word Mazzaroth is interesting because it's never translated in any English translation of the Bible. And if it is translated, it's mistranslated. It's translated as constellations. But it doesn't mean that. It means literally in Hebrew, the 12 signs of the zodiac. So God is saying to Job, do you know how I bring forth the 12 signs of the zodiac in their seasons? And how I've created the principles of the heavens and have given those principles dominion over the earth. I mean, that's pretty clear right there, that astrology has some merit if we're studying the 12 signs of the zodiac and the planetary motions through the archetypal spectrum, and relating them to our lives on the planet Earth. So it's pretty clear right there. And then you have scientists like Carl Sagan saying that astrology is bunk. Just outright dismissing astrology. And there was 186 scientists in the 70s who signed a petition against astrology, proclaiming that astrology and that kind of woolly, irrational thinking is going to do harm to society. And many of their attacks, the attack on astrology, launched by some Nobel Prize winners in this group of scientists, many of their arguments in their attack could equally be aimed at religion, any religion. And so, but they chose to attack astrology specifically because astrology does use some science. It used the mathematics of figuring out the planetary orbits. We have to have mathematics for that. in ancient societies, especially in the Greek times, mathematicians were synonymous with astrologers. I mean, you had to be a mathematician to be an astrologer, and it worked both ways. Because everybody back then was inspired by the symbols of the heavens and their unfoldings. You know, that really generated the lore of the mythic stories that we have handed down to us. The truth is that scientists don't know how to conduct an experiment in astrology. I mean, every individual is a unique person with a soul, and you can't conduct an experiment of statistical data that's repeatable over a population with astrology. You just can't do it. I mean, every chart is uniquely that person. Even twins born at the same time have unique souls, unique consciousnesses that's pervading those charts, and it's up to that soul, that consciousness, to use the gifts endowed at the moment of birth. At the moment of birth, you take on your birth chart like a bottle of wine. You know, you're born in the season you were born in. You're going to taste like that season. If you're born in the spring, and the sun is the poetic metaphor of the urge to shine. I mean, that's what the sun does. It's that simple. It shines. And so, if your urge to shine is in the spring, then your urge to shine is, let's say you're born in the sign of Taurus. Your urge to shine is to be like nature during that moment, during that time when things are blooming and coming to life, you know. But when the sun's in, say, Aries, the sign of the warrior, when things are just springing forth into being, your essence, your radiance, your charisma is more like nature coming alive for the first time, you know. That's why the principle of Aries is I am, and Taurus is I have, you know, because Taurus is about the abundance, the bounty of nature coming into life, into fertility. It's the gardener. Hence, a lot of Taurians would do well to maintain gardens, or cook food, or dance, or do anything that represents a connection to being part of nature. You know, this is the archetype of the builder. And this is what astrology is really about. It's about archetypes. It doesn't predict things concretely, events. It predicts things archetypally. It says, during this next 3 months, the planet Jupiter, which symbolizes expansion and growth and opportunity, is crossing this point in your chart. And so you can take it or leave it, you know. It's up to you. But knowing is half the battle, as G.I. Joe used to say. Scientists believe that there are only 4 forces in the universe. 4. That is, gravitation, electromagnetism, and the strong and the weak nuclear forces that hold the atom together. But in fact, astrology and metaphysics proclaim that there is actually one more force, the 5th force, which unifies all these forces, and that is the force of consciousness itself. The force that dreamed all these forces into being in the first place. Now, quantum physicists are discovering that, yes, consciousness does have an effect, actually a measurable effect, on the experiment. If the observer is there observing, the repeatable experiment that science is addicted to, turns out that it changes, you know, based on whether the observer is there or not. So consciousness has a direct influence on the experiment. And we see that in everyday life, you know. If someone's watching you, you act a lot different than when there's not a crowd watching you, you know. And so consciousness does have a force. And science is always trying to, at least classical science, eliminate the eye of consciousness from the equations, you know. And yet consciousness doesn't go away. It can't go away. We're right here. We couldn't, this very chair that I'm sitting on right here was once an idea in the mind of its maker. And this whole world out here was once an idea in the mind of the maker, you know, the capital M maker. So it's a really beautiful thing. I mean, astrology has the highest aims of science, you know, the quest for truth, and the highest aims of religion, you know, the quest for meaning and union with God, you know, as its highest aims as well. So really, astrology doesn't need to be a thorn in the side of science and religion, so to speak, since we all have the same highest aims in our consciousness. Believe it or not, you're alive, and no scientific equation can tell you why. So astrology is the science of why. Not just what you are about, but why. Why were you born? everybody's born in response to a spiritual need on the planet. And it's up to us to discover that spiritual meaning, that of the quality of the moment that we were injected into life and, put into this body and this consciousness at this particular moment in time when the planets were aligned in this beautiful configuration. It's almost like when we come to this solar system, it's like our souls come in like sponges wiping water off a cabinet and soaking up all the essence of that planetary alignment and then depositing that into our baby form. And we sit there in the crib going, whoa, what just happened? It's pretty exciting, actually, when you think about how life comes to life. Because when you look into a baby's eyes, you see a soul there. You see a unique person in that body. Not every baby looks the same. You look into some babies' eyes and they look like little psychologists, They got Scorpio rising and they got these deep, penetrating eyes. They look like Freud analyzing you already, And then other babies look really sunny and happy, Maybe they have Leo rising, the archetype of sunniness and radiance and that kind of performer qualities, It makes sense that our consciousness should be factored into the known forces of the universe. I think ideas shape reality. Even the Bible says that God spoke the word and created the universe. From the mind of God, God visualized existence into being. And that's what astrology is about. Astrology is about seeing various seasons of your soul, or seeing various talents given to you by the divine, and visualizing ways to utilize those seasons and those talents within in your life. Get it going on. Get your projects going on. Even Jesus said, do not bury your talents. The little coins, but your talents as well. The inner gifts of the soul that you were endowed with at the moment of your birth. So I want to inspire you to at least get online, click where you can get a free chart, right there on the site, and print out your chart. Just look at it, and contemplate your moon sign, contemplate your sun sign, and the angle that they were of light transmission between them, Because if you're born on the full moon, you have a whole different personality template than, say, someone born under the dark moon, when the moon disappears from the sky, coming back to the sun for 3.5 days. A whole different personality profile exists between, say, someone with Mars and Aries compared to, say, Mars and Taurus. They're like day and night, those two people. And so, check out your chart, and you'll start to grow in consciousness, because you'll realize the essence of who you are and why you were born. And there's nothing to fear. There's nothing really to fear. Astrology's not going to tell you that, next week you're going to get into a car accident or something. It doesn't do that. If Uranus, the planet of, radical shifts and the unexpected, is squaring your natal Mars, which is the planet of accidents, then astrologers might say, hey, during this 2-year period, while Uranus is squaring to Mars, you might want to not put the pedal to the metal, because there is a tendency for shock and surprise through Mars, going too fast, accidents. So, an astrologer can give you that kind of advice. But he's not going to say an accident's going to happen, He's going to say, he or she's going to say, during this time, one of the best uses of this is to revolutionize your willpower. It's a square, which is the sacred geometry of that alignment. And it says a square is all about conflict for growth and passion and the path of individuation, the path of true authenticity of soul. And when a square comes along, it says, are you going to be, especially between Uranus, the planet of freedom, and Mars, your willpower, it's asking you to express your will in a very freeing, liberating way. And if you're suppressing your will under certain circumstances, like let's say at work you're being suppressed by the boss or the structure or whatnot, and not liberating your will to action, Mars, then of course things like accidents might happen to sort of give you some alone time with the divine, so you can say, ow, I really need to change my life, I think that the negative manifestations come when we are ignoring what's there. And the people that say, oh, I don't want to know, I'm afraid, to hear about my astrology chart, they're the people that are just asking for those accidents to come at them, because they don't want to know. They want to be unconscious, and so they want to float along the sea of life, just without knowing the territory, without knowing the map of where they're going, just adrift, as opposed to being on your vessel and being guided across the sea to the land, to the territory you want to explore. There's a whole difference in living that comes through having that kind of passion and that kind of sort of vision about your life. Because astrologers believe that consciousness is a force, and that through the direct direction of it you can change your life, and that through the seasons of your soul we are subject to the forces of celestial radiance in this solar system, most importantly, but also the fixed stars of the galaxy on a larger level, on a more spiritual level. That's why I call this Cosmic Consciousness Through Celestial Radiance, the subtitle of the show. I know it's a mouthful, but it'll come. Cosmic Consciousness, consciousness of the cosmic through celestial radiation and radiance. So the radiance that's coming, strands of light, and the light, is where the power is. The spectrum of light. It makes the plants grow. If you take the sun away, we're all pretty much going to die. So light is very important to understand. There is a metaphysics of light that can alter your whole space-time continuum if you open up to that. And astrology is the focus. Not only because I'm an astrologer and I have colleagues across the world who are astrologers, it's because astrology is the science, the art, the language, the poetic, metaphorical, mythological communication with the divine tool of interpreting the celestial radiance and giving us guidance in our lives. And it acts as the greatest tool for inspiration. My good friend David Alexander English, an artist in Venice Beach, who is doing some art for the movie Return of the Magi, which you haven't heard. If you haven't heard of Return of the Magi, it's coming out May 18th at the UAC conference, the largest astrology conference in the world, and we're going to be showing it to hopefully a big audience there. And I'll be selling DVDs in the trade show of the movie, so you can get one and take it home and watch it to your heart's content. It's a collection of some of the greatest astrologers in the world breaking it down, and so we'll be there for that. And David has contributed his artwork to the project. You can check his artwork out in full at thesacredgeometrypaintings.com. And we were talking the other night, and he said that we're moving into defining the culture through the sensation of energy, which I thought was really cool. And he said that the function of the human being is going to be defined as one who absorbs and transmits this celestial energy. He goes, this whole evolutionary step pretty much collides with the industrial culture that we've built out here, spewing all its smoke into the air, pollution, industry, the fires of industry. And so astrology is about celestial radiation as knowledge. Astrologers are saying that, this Pluto, this little rock at the edge of the solar system, is lining up with the galactic center right now. And the planet Jupiter, a much bigger, gaseous, giant planet, 350 times the size of the Earth, which might have a rock-solid core at the center, is lining up with Pluto, and the galactic center transmission, which is about the source of consciousness, is coming down through Pluto, the planet that almost has a direct connection with the myth of Kali in Hindu religion. Kali was the destroyer, but also the creatrix. And so Pluto has a very transformative, shamanic alchemy theme of transmuting the lead of the lower self into the gold of the higher self. A lot of people aren't ready for Pluto transmutations, and yet Pluto keeps moving through your chart. Sometimes it comes right to some of your planets and says, this force of consciousness represented by this planet needs to undergo a dramatic transformation of consciousness. Currently, as I film this, we have the galactic center beaming down. It's right over there behind the camera, because actually the sun's right there, Sagittarius, it's building up, and Mercury's there. They're building into alignment with Pluto and Jupiter. So right there behind us is the galactic center is beaming down its source consciousness, saying return to the source, humanity. Find out what you're really made of, which is really interesting because most astrophysicists agree that at the center of galaxies are these supermassive black holes that are both creators and destroyers of stars. So, don't know what that says about things, but then we have, all right, the thing it says is that there's a beam of consciousness coming down that says that you are a citizen of this galaxy, and that we need to start playing a role about that. Not that we have any interplanetary civilizations yet, but there will be. Humanity has dreamed of getting to the moon, and we made it to the moon, and now we've sent space voyagers out past Pluto. So, there's an evolution of that coming. The space and time, as we know it, is a lot different than what it actually is like. And the fabric of space and time, when wedded with this force of consciousness I've been talking about, is going to revolutionize things in the ages to come. I mean, in Jupiter, in 2020, we have the great Jupiter-Saturn conjunction falling in the sign of Aquarius. And that alone is going to accelerate the world towards a mental thought consciousness paradigm, So, and that's on December 21st of 2020. So 2020, get ready for a whole new world, folks. It won't be just cell phones calling each other. It'll be like holographic. You hit a button or speak a verbal command word, answer. And all of a sudden, holographic of the person just appears right before you, like they're standing right there. It's going to get that bizarre. It's going to get there quick. But this is just the first stages of the technology as we're seeing it here, and it's already changing the world. So here's behind me is the galactic center is beaming down through the lens of what Pluto, the planet of rebirth, the planet of transformation, the planet that symbolizes the mythological underworld, which in modern society we would call it the unconscious, that we explore through psychotherapy. And the unconscious is where all the buried treasure lives, because all the gold and silver veins ran in the underworld in ancient times. So you got this Pluto force, which is almost like Kali from the Indian mythos, which is the creatrix and the goddess of destruction all at the same time. So you got creative destruction of the galactic center coming through the planet of creative destruction and rebirth and transformation, and that's being beamed right through the planet Jupiter. I was just out here the other night, about a month ago, when the sun was in Scorpio. You could still see Jupiter right when the sun went down, and I aimed my telescope at Jupiter, and you could see the moon going around it. And I let my wife look through it. She goes, "There's a whole party going on up there." And I said, "Yep." I said, "There's a whole party going on up there, and there's probably beings on other dimensions hanging out around Jupiter, checking out the scenes, checking out the scenery." Let's have lunch on Europa and watch Ganymede rise over Jupiter. So, who knows? You could do that, huh? Travel around in your astral body in dream time and check out other planets and other dimensions. But so right now we have the galactic center beamed through Pluto, and then now it's being beamed through Jupiter, the planet of cosmic sort of consciousness, in a sense of religion, philosophy, the quest for truth and meaning, the planet of growth. In Hellenistic astrology, it's both hot and wet. In other words, it likes to inspire energy and raise the energy of a system, and then it also likes to moisten or make connections happen in a system, make things come together like ingredients in a cake. Without wetness, the quality of wetness, the ingredients don't mix. So Jupiter is about mixing the ingredients. Hence the planet of opportunity, because it both raises the energy and makes connections happen. So it's a beautiful thing. And so all that's coming through Jupiter's beam, and then the new moon in Sag just came through. We just saw the moon go through the other day, and I checked the headlines, and it said, and I expected something to be something bigger than life, Jupiter. I expected some kind of Pluto, transformation. I was talking to my astrologer friend Moses on the internet, Sirigar, and and we were both talking about it, and he goes, check out the headlines, and we both looked, and it said huge cobra found in Africa. I was like, oh, huge, Jupiter, cobra, Pluto is the snake-like phoenix rising out of the ashes. Imagery of the snake shedding the skin. It's the most serpentine planet we have. And then of course it said in Africa, and Africa could be symbolized like the galactic center, because the galactic center is the source of the galactic, all the stars in this galaxy. It's like the center. And anthropologists and archaeologists say that the first or the oldest human life, thousands and thousands of years ago, goes back to Gondwana land, which is basically Africa, back in the Pangea days, and everything was still connected. So, if you just watch the news, you'll see the transits in the sky. You can learn astrology through the news. Just look at the headlines and watch what's happening in the sky, because often what is going on in the sky, the themes that are playing out with the planetary archetypes, will be reflected in the headlines. It's like as clear as day. So I'm glad to have you on this show, Astrology Illustrated TV. We're going to have a lot of shows coming from a lot of astrologers. Hopefully astrologers across the world will tune in and get some inspiration for a show and put it on YouTube, and we'll connect them up right there on the site, so that we can just constantly be beaming astrological knowledge, which has been so suppressed for millennia. But as soon as you repress something into the unconscious, it has a tendency to brew for a while, and then it gets bigger than life, and then it bursts back onto the scene and sort of makes you face it, And astrology has been suppressed since it was kicked out of the universities in 1776 by the French. And then a wave went through Europe, the wave of enlightenment, which was good. We needed some enlightenment to sort of break out of the religious mindset that was holding us back from exploring, this quest for truth. And so we needed to balance that out. And now we've sort of gone to the extreme of that whole experiment. Now we have, separation of church and state, separation of science and religion, everything's separated. And yet we're still looking for the unified field. So, on this show, we're going to have local astrologer Gary Caton of dreamastrologer.com coming out here. I'm basically going to turn my whole house here into a studio. I have Uranus squaring my moon right now, which would suggest that, the planet of astrology and metaphysics is squaring my moon. Moon governs your home, where you live, your roots, your nest. And so instead of changing my home, because we just bought this one a year and a half, 2 years ago, and we really like it here, so instead of having to change my home, and which I have been changing my home a lot, I've been traveling all year making Return of the Magi, but instead of changing the home, we're just going to get the home weirdedized. Uranus is the strangest planet in our solar system. It's the only planet that has its north pole facing the sun. It literally rotates, on its side like this, with it, with its north pole facing the sun. Most planets go around the sun rotating like this, with their north pole up and tilted up like this. But Uranus is the only planet, and Uranus in Greek means heaven, that has its north pole facing the sun, which is a very bizarre planet. I mean, imagine if you lived on a planet like that, where one side was like super tropical, right here, where no life could even exist. It would be so hot. And then, it'd get tropical regions, and then we'd get temperate, and then it would get cold, and then it would get like frozen tundra over here one side. That would just be a weird planet to live on. Well, Aquarians are tuned into that planet, very much so, and the planet Saturn. You got to give the classical planet Saturn some respect there, which is the Time Lord. Saturn governs the future and the past, and the structure of time. But Uranus is the bizarre wisdom of the mystic who comes in and says, "Wait a minute, we don't have to sacrifice to the Virgin to make the rains come. That's dumb." And everybody says, "Kill the mystic! He should not be talking like that. That's sacrilege." And the mystic's like, chained up, 10 years later, or maybe 100 years later, they go, "Wow, maybe the mystic was right. Because we didn't really get to sacrifice a virgin this year. We ran out of them. And the rain still came. God, that mystic was right." So, anyway, I hope you join us for many episodes. We're going to have a lot of creative directions we're going to go in. We're just going to let the creativity flow, you know, on this Astrology Illustrated TV. And we have a monthly group, the Asheville Friends of Astrology, as I discussed. And the speaker of the month, whoever comes, or if we just have a chart party, I'll go there and film it and put it up, and that'll be the astrology show. So that'll be beaming at you live too, or at least a transcript of it. And we'll be seeing you.